Hello and thank you for joining me once again. Today we are looking at an old Athearn model. Now, it isn't one of the blue box locomotives or a ready-to-run, but an early Genesis model. This is a like-new SD75M lettered for the Burlington Northern Santa Fe in the classic warbonnet paint scheme. Before shipping, I paid about $70 from trains.com, not affiliated of course, but these seem to go anywhere from $80 to $140 online in various states of new, like new, kind of put together, so I think it was a good deal. This one was like new and more or less untouched. My plan for this is to turn it into a lease unit for Progress Rail, which I think is a decent excuse to run an old warbonnet mixed in with some UP power. And opening the box, we are greeted with a set of assembly instructions and a history of the SD70 series. Feel free to pause and read that if you'd like. This whole thing is available on hosecret.net too if you go digging for it. Lifting the top piece of foam, we find the model cradled by a shaped foam insert and wrapped in plastic, not just in a cardboard box like a blue box kit, but definitely pre-plastic ice cubes like we're used to now. In the hands, the model has a good weight, and more weight than any of my blue box model kits, but lighter than a contemporary Genesis model. Details look very sharp, paint application looks great. We have a cab interior, which is nice to see. Holes for the grab irons and other details appear to be ready drilled from the factory, which is nice, as most sources, including the instructions, indicate that you'll have to drill those out, but these seem to be ready to go on both the pilots and all over the hood here. I'll definitely be adding hoses and other details. There's a lot of printed labels on the shell. Look at the top. I think the one thing I'm not crazy about is the horn. It looks a little, I don't know, flat, plain. I'm not really sure. It just doesn't look too great, but maybe that'll get swapped out. Interestingly enough, according to an old model railroader article from 2000 previewing the brand new Genesis line, brand new back then, the couplers are mentioned as being Bachmann Easy Mate. Good to know that the current day Genesis hasn't strayed too far from its plastic coupler roots. Inside the foam, we have your separately applied grab irons in one bag, ditch light housings and bulbs for the ditch lights, sunshades, and different sized windshield wipers in another. This third bag has some side frame detail for the trucks, sanding lines, that sort of thing. And there should be some handrails here, hiding under the foam, a full set of SD70 wide cab handrails, no metal wire like the blue box models. In reality though, this is essentially a deluxe blue box model, new mechanism, new tooling, details included, but you have to put it together. That was how Athearn was doing things back then when this was announced, and so it being a kit makes sense. So I've been finding myself interested in lease units, often seen in original Class 1 colors, but with names crossed out or patched over, often grimy, faded paint, mismatched panels, rust, but they make for an interesting modeling subject. Now I do know that Athearn has actually released recently some ex-Santa Fe Progress Rail SD75Ms in their Genesis line, and they are primed for grime, but I like the idea of spending less than $100 on a model and getting to do the detailing and weathering myself. You know, it's my favorite part of this hobby. I had also considered a Walthers mainline SD75M as they are available in warbonnet colors, but this one was still half the price of the cheapest Walthers example I could find, and I kinda like the idea of getting a super early Genesis model, practically brand new for really cheap. That was really the appeal. Now I actually want to compare this model to my UP 1979, the more recent SD70 Genesis release, and we can get an idea of what a difference 20 years will make with the tooling. Looking closely at them next to each other, you can see the tooling is shared between the two. In some instances, the detail is actually more sharp on the BNSF model. The fan behind the cab is a metal piece and separately applied on the BNSF model, while on 1979, it's molded and painted to look like a fan is there. Lift rings look a little bit different on the hood between the two. This vent on the front of the exhaust is a little bit bigger on 1979. Walkway tread is present on both but finer on 1979. The door on the nose is thicker on the BNSF, but I understand this is removable. I might be able to slim it down a little bit, but honestly it's not offensive and I might just leave it. Probably the biggest difference is how the model opens, and it opens up by unclipping the hood from the chassis and the walkway and the sill, as opposed to having screws under the trucks and fuel tank. I find pulling from the cab is easier to get it loose at first, and then pulling from the back as well. Inside you can see the mechanism as it was described in the model railroader preview I mentioned earlier, which mentions having a German Buehler can motor, with dual turned flywheels of course, and the board for the electrical connections is clipped in place, which is the same system that's still used today, but now with their own 21-pin motherboard if you go DCC ready, and the Tsunami board if you go with DCC sound. You can see the light bulbs are clipped into place, and it's very neatly done. Now I'm going to open up the trucks and remove any old grease, if there is any, and give it some fresh grease and oil, and we'll give it a little back and forth on the test track to see how it does. The mechanism is very smooth on this little test track, and I'm very impressed with the performance. The light comes on and is very steady for the most part while on DC power, and I am just using my cheap train set controller for this. Now the audio didn't record, but it is not as loud as a Blue Box model, but not as quiet as a current Genesis model. It still has a little bit of a growl, but it's not a big deal. So this project, this model, will likely be featured in a future video, pending the schedule and how long it takes to get parts and things assembled. I'm not going to do any of the assembly of the details and everything on camera. It sounds kind of tedious and distracting, so I'm going to just do that off camera. I'll try to remember to take photos of the various steps, and I'll hopefully have it featured in a future video like I did for 6867, just kind of doing a showcase, maybe get some footage of it running on the club layout. That might be a little ways off. Progress rail decals are not readily available, so I have a custom set being made and I'm very excited for them. I'll talk more about those in the future video when this is completed. But I think that's going to do it for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking it, and I will see you eventually.